What's going on, guys? Welcome back to The Shelf, and today we are going over my list of my top 10 films of 2024. You know, this was an interesting year. I feel like we suffered some of the effects of the writer's strike, and we're still kind of shaking off the effects of that. But overall, this was still a really solid year in my opinion. So, as per usual, there are still a good number of movies from this year that, for one reason or another, I just have not been able to see yet. Those include, but are not limited to, The Brutalist, Gladiator II, Megalopolis, Kinds of Kindness, The Beast, Red Rooms, Baby Girl, and Queer. So with that in mind, it kind of goes without saying that my list is sort of subject to change over time as I eventually watch these movies, but I'm confident with the list I have for you guys today, and I think it's still a really great list of films. So this is the list as it currently stands, and I feel pretty good about it. The really cool thing about 2024 is that this was the year for horror films. Literally half of my list are all horror films. I can't remember the last time that I had that many horror films in my top 10. It just doesn't really happen very often. But that being said, I had a pretty hard time deciding what my number one movie of the year would be. 2024 kind of lacked a movie like The Holdovers or Past Lives, a movie that really hits me on an emotional level that sort of cements itself instantly as an instant classic and something that, you know, shoots right to the top of the list. I didn't really have that this year, but with that being said, I will take the trade-off of not having that kind of movie for the amount of great horror films that we did get, because as you know, I love horror movies. These are just my personal favorites of the year. These are not the objective best films of 2024, so just know that going in. And also be aware that there may be some minor spoilers for some of the films that I'm going to talk about, so just tread lightly if you hear me start to talk about a movie that you haven't seen yet. I'm not going to go in depth, but I am going to rattle off some honorable mentions because these are films that I did really enjoy from this year, but they're not quite top 10 material. Strange Darling, Snack Shack, We Live in Time, Rebel Ridge, Civil War, A Real Pain, Anora, I Saw the TV Glow, The Wild Robot, Furiosa, The First Omen, and The Last Stop in Yuma County. Alright, so with those honorable mentions out of the way, let's get into the top 10. Coming in at number 10 is Sing Sing. Sing Sing is a movie that I was pretty excited for a while. It was kind of this elusive thing that was really only playing in like film festivals and major cities, but it just simply wasn't available to me. So naturally, whenever I did finally get to see it, I had built up some expectations. I'm very happy to report that this movie did in fact meet those expectations. Colman Domingo is incredible in this movie, and he leads this cast of actors who are playing themselves. And mostly all of these actors were previously incarcerated inmates who were able to turn their lives around through this program that was offered to them while they were behind bars. So in many ways, this movie's kind of meta. It's very true to life. You know, these guys really did kind of live this experience. The movie is incredibly moving. I found it very mesmerizing in a way, because essentially you are watching these men who are actors, but they're pretending to act and learn how to act for the first time in some cases. It's pretty spellbinding because you're watching these performances and you're really not sure what to expect from them. So they kind of really keep you guessing, and it's very impressive what these guys are able to achieve, being that for many of them this was their first film. And it's just this story of these guys who have been cast aside by society and are trying to find meaning within their own lives, and they're doing that through acting. And isn't that what we do as audience members, is watch films and try to find meaning in those films? It's just a really cool film, and it really, you know, brought out a lot of emotions in me. So yeah, Sing Sing, beautiful film. At the time of this recording, I'm still not sure that it's widely available, but whenever it is available, I would really encourage you to go check it out. Coming in at number 9, we have In a Violent Nature. This is one that I was super excited for because I heard that it was this love letter to slasher films, especially camp slasher films, which is like my shit. So I kind of knew I was going to be all in on this one. And what you have here is essentially a love letter to slasher films. And it's a deconstruction of the genre in a way. And A lot of people have made the Friday the 13th comparison, and it's an apt comparison, but I think it's doing a lot more than just kind of providing a modern homage to a Friday the 13th film. Obviously, we're in a Friday the 13th drought, so, a lot of people have sort of reduced this movie to being sort of a Friday the 13th that isn't, but it's really doing a lot more than that. It's playing on tropes of slasher films. It's very aware of what it's doing, and it's simultaneously sort of tearing the genre down and like picking apart how silly it can be at times, while also acknowledging that despite these things, we love it for that, and it's why we come to these things. So in many ways, it's a critical look at slasher films, but it's also a love letter to them. It sort of asks the question, what does Jason Voorhees do when the campers aren't around? Like, we don't ever see that side. So it's almost like you have two parallel movies. One of them that we've seen before being the Friday the 13th films, but then you have this other parallel story going on where there's so much going on this side that we don't ever get to see. And this movie shows us that. And it's absurd at times, and it's funny at times, and it's, brutal, and it's just so much fun. And, people have sort of criticized it for the gimmick of, the perspective that we're on, where we're following the killer for the whole duration of the film. And they've called it boring. And, if you find something boring, there's really not much anyone can say to kind of prove that you're wrong. Like, if you find it boring, you find it boring. It's totally subjective, right? But to say that it's bad because of this decision, well, that's where I would have to disagree with you, because the movie is doing this intentionally. So you can't really fault it for that. You can not enjoy it, but the movie's very aware of what it's doing. And it's doing it intentionally, and there's a lot of thought and reason behind the decisions that they make in a violent nature. So yeah, this one's fantastic. I think it might be on Shudder still, so if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. It's really, really good. Coming in at number 8, we have It's What's Inside. This is one that really came out of nowhere for me. I began hearing people talk about it on social media, and it seemed like it was a good time. People were rating it very highly, so I figured, why not? Let's go check it out. And I put it on expecting, nothing more than just an entertaining time. And I got that in spades. This is a movie that stuck with me for days after it was over. I kind of wrote this off initially in the first 20 minutes as being like this Zoomer thriller with some pretty insufferable characters. But as you go through the film, you sort of come to realize that these characters are insufferable, and it's sort of intentional. They're not all insufferable, but for the most part, it's a younger cast, it's modern, so, they have those modern teenage young adult sensibilities to them. So I guess depending on what generation you're from, your mileage will vary, but I digress. Essentially, this movie is kind of like Clue by way of bodies, 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 with splashes of Talk to Me thrown in the mix. As things started to progress and get more and more confusing, I found myself having to pause from time to time just to kind of get my bearings and really wrap my head around what was going on. One of the benefits of this being on Netflix was that I was able to pause it. But by the time I was ready to hit play again, I was so eager to see where things were going. And that's because it's the kind of movie that is actively challenging the audience and is asking you frequently, hey, are you really paying attention? Are you following what we're doing here? Because we know that it's confusing, and it's going to be on you to make sure that you're keeping up, because this shit's getting weird. And it makes you want to keep up and follow along, because what's going on in this movie is so deliciously malicious and playful, and it's just so ridiculous and over the top, and it sort of has you on the edge of your seat waiting to see what's going on. And it's super well written. All the character dynamics are established really well through this really cool editing techniques in the beginning of the film. It does a lot of work early on as far as expositing the situation, so that by the time we find ourselves in the thick of the plot, all of the legwork has been done already by way of this really cool editing technique. But yeah, this shit was just such a good time. It's probably still on Netflix. You should definitely go check it out if you have not seen it. Coming in at number 7, we have Alien Romulus. Fede Alvarez brings so much to the world of Alien while simultaneously paying homage to almost all of the films that came before it. David Johnson steals the show for me. He is so good. He gets to do a lot, and it's a lot of fun to get to watch him do his thing. Kaylee Spaney also has a ton of range and is really cementing herself as a huge star. Even with some distracting CGI, I found that this film was very successful at delivering the scares and the tension and the atmosphere that you come to expect from early Alien films. And in the process, nothing feels overly modern. All of the effects and everything really look like they were ripped out of like the late 70s. You can tell that they took great care and effort to make sure that they did their best to replicate things and make it feel as, nostalgic as they could. To me, this franchise has felt lost for a really long time, and Fede Alvarez really seems to have brought it back. He has such a clear reverence for this franchise, and it shows in every frame of the movie. Seeing this in theaters was such a treat, and I'm really eager to see a sequel with Kaylee and David front and center. Coming in at number 6, we have Longlegs. When I first heard of Longlegs, the marketing was very mysterious. It was not forthcoming with a lot of details. It was very creepy, it was very eerie. Some of the images that they used in the promotional material, all really good stuff. Then we began to learn more, and I discovered that it contained Michael Monroe, and Nick Cage was attached, and it was directed by a filmmaker that I was familiar with, Osgood Perkins. So right there, my ticket was bought. So with that being said, I really made sure that I watched no trailers for this. None. And let me tell you, that's the way to go, because my theatrical experience was incredible. Nothing was spoiled for me. And it was hard to do this. The marketing was going crazy. You're hearing a ton of stuff about how it's like Silence of the Lambs and Nick Cage and this and that. And, it was hard to stay away from, but I did it. And it paid off. My theater was full. Everyone was bought in and invested in what was going on. It was awesome. It really, really enhanced the experience for me. A little bit of that magic was lost with the at-home experience. But regardless, this is such an excellent modern horror film that really captures that 90s nostalgic feeling without beating you over the head with like really clunky, awkward needle drops and other obnoxious things that bring you out of the experience and just kind of pull you out of the movie. Cage is fantastic, and I will see anything that Micah Monroe does next. She is awesome. And I really can't wait for Osgood Perkins' next film too. So yeah, Longlegs was just incredible. One of the most effective horror films of the year for me. Coming in at number 5, we have The Substance. This is another one that sort of came out of nowhere for me. I heard that it was the second film from filmmaker Coralie Fargeau, who I was familiar with from her 2017 film Revenge, which I really enjoyed. So, as with Longlegs, with Osgood Perkins and Blackcoat's daughter, with The Substance, I knew Coralie Fargeau from Revenge, and a lot of the time for me, that's all I need to get me to go see a film. If I like your first movie, I'm going to go see your next movie. That's not to say that your next movie is going to be great and that I'm going to like it, but it's enough to kind of get me in the door. And that's what happened with The Substance. That and all of the rave reviews that it was getting. So, those two things right there, I went into this and my ticket was bought. And same thing with Longlegs, I watched no trailers. From the time that I found out about this movie till the time that I was able to see it was a very small window. So I almost didn't have any time to do any research, and I didn't want to. I heard that it was good, I liked the filmmaker, and I was there. All I knew about it was that it was a body horror film, and I'm into those, so the rest is history. The experience of going into a movie that you're interested in without watching any trailers, it cannot be understated how effective this is. I really would encourage people to do less trailer watching. For me personally, 2025, I'm going to watch as few trailers as I can. If I'm interested in something, it'll be because of who I know is attached to it and what trusted critics that I follow are saying about it. And I'm just really going to try it. It's a case-by-case basis. Certain movies doesn't matter as much for me, but by and large, I'm not going to watch trailers. But going back to The Substance, this movie was just phenomenal. It blew me away right from that iconic opening scene, which is so effective, at detailing what the rest of the film is about to be, thematically at least. At the time of this recording, it really seems like Demi Moore has a real shot at getting an Oscar. She just won Golden Globe for Best Actress, so really, really would love to see that. I love a great narrative, something that I can get invested in, and she absolutely deserves it. So, I would just love to see that for her, because she really gives this role her all. She puts everything she has into this. She bears all for us, and she does it in the name of this movie and the message behind it. And I really, really think she's so good in it. Margaret Qualley is also great, but she is not being asked as much as I think Demi Moore was. So, this is sort of Demi's movie in a way. Coming in at number 4, we have Didi. When I first saw the trailer for Didi in theaters, it immediately conjured up comparisons in my head to movies like Mid-90s and 8th Grade, which on their own it's not a bad thing to be compared to those movies. I enjoy those movies very much. The only negative thing about it is that I guess now in this modern era, we are like romanticizing and being nostalgic for 2008, which makes me feel very old. This movie is so great because it's so effective at portraying this period in time. Not only 2008, but this time in young Didi's life. Just the way people act when they're at this junction in their life, in their adolescence. Also, I said Didi, that's just sort of what his family calls him. His name is actually Chris. But yeah, man, this movie, like, just the things that it does are things that, if you're my age or around my age, once you saw it on the screen, you were like, I can't believe that it's like this weird idiosyncrasy that has been caught on film. It's insane. It's things like wanting your crush to hear your ringtone, and your older sibling having disdain that you're moving from MySpace to Facebook, being in circumstances with people that you want to be liked by, and thinking that you should say one thing, but you wind up saying the complete wrong thing, and just the crushing, sort of like burning feeling of like embarrassment that this movie makes me feel, because I was in a lot of similar situations as Chris is in this movie. It's so masterfully captured. It feels like a snapshot in time. It's so good. I'm sure all of us have had moments in our life where we were super shitty to like our mom or our grandmom or our family member, and it's painfully obvious to us now that was totally unwarranted, and it makes you want to go back in time and like strangle your younger self. And that's what you want to do with Chris, because obviously you've been there, so you get it, but at the same time you just want to like smack him. It shows what it's like to try to impress an older group of kids, trying to impress your crush, and just generally trying to figure out who you are. It's all captured so faithfully and like without compromise. It's romanticized in the sense that the film clearly has a reverence for this time period and the importance of it as these formative years, but it doesn't end the way that like a conventional coming of age story would, where like everything's great and everything. And I find that to be so true to life, and I really admired Didi for that, because as the movie was coming to a close, I was wondering how they were going to, tie up all the loose ends. And they do it the way that it would happen in real life. And it doesn't, cut any corners, and it just feels very authentic. And I really, really admired it for that. All right, coming in at number 3, we have Nosferatu. I won't discuss this one for too long, considering that I just released an entire video on it not long ago. I'll link that right here. But I will just say that this is something that I cannot wait to go see again in theaters. In my opinion, Robert Eggers is 4 for 4. The guy don't miss. The performances are all top-notch. Yes, even Aaron Taylor Johnson, those of you haters out there, can kick rocks with no socks. The cinematography is jaw-dropping, like legitimately. The costumes, the lighting, the recreation of the period are just as stunningly accurate as you would come to expect from a Robert Eggers film. And that's not even getting into how great Bill Skarsgård is as Count Orlok. I mean, the guy is just not there. He's left the building. This is just a classic horror film for the ages, man. I mean, this thing's gonna age like wine. It's a new telling of this story for a new generation, and it has this different sort of viewpoint as we follow Ellen for the majority of the film, and in a lot of ways it's really her film, where in prior Nosferatu adaptations that was not the case. So this really does feel worthy in that sense of justifying its own existence and offering a fresh perspective. Alright, so coming in at number 2, we have Dune Part 2. What Denis and his cast and crew have managed to achieve with these two films, Dune Part 1 and 2, is nothing short of incredible. They are both instant masterpieces. You know, in a time where I'm pretty disillusioned with like modern Star Wars and other modern sci-fi films as well, Dune 1 and 2 have sort of cemented themselves as like the undisputed titans of the genre, and really kind of got me back into sci-fi in a way. There are at least 3 performances here that I would be very surprised if they didn't get some sort of Oscar buzz once Oscar season comes around. Timothée Chalamet has really cemented himself as the actor of his generation. He's going to have just the greatest career, and I'm super in on the guy. He seems like a super chill, down-to-earth dude, and he deserves all the success that he's had lately. The visuals of this film are unparalleled, as well as the music, and just how well it all pairs with the world building and overall aesthetic. It all meshes so well together. If we never got another Dune film, I would be okay with that, but I'm pretty sure that eventually we will get Dune Messiah. I believe it's already been confirmed. And when that's all said and done, you know, that trilogy of Dune 1, 2, and Messiah will, in my eyes, you know, rival that of the original Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. And, you know, it'll be the sci-fi edition, you know, that we've all been wanting, basically. Just a modern masterpiece trilogy that we really haven't seen the likes of since the early 2000s with Lord of the Rings, in my opinion. Yeah, this just feels like sci-fi for adults. You know, no shade if you're into Star Wars and what they're doing over there. I hear Andor's pretty great, but I'm personally pretty checked out on Disney Star Wars, so it's just really nice that for people like me who aren't into that anymore, we do have things like this to kind of, you know, fill that void and satiate my sci-fi appetite. All right, and at number 1, my favorite movie of 2024 at the time of this recording is Challengers. I saw this pretty early in the year, and it shot pretty much right up to number 1 when I saw it. But I assumed that as the year would progress, that something would come along and dethrone it eventually. But nothing really did, and so it kind of wound up winning the year for me by default. That's not to say that it didn't earn the top spot, because it definitely does. This movie was hands down the biggest surprise of 2024 for me. I'm a big fan of Luca Guadagnino. I've really enjoyed most of the movies of his that I've seen, so I figured why not go see his tennis movie. I'm a fan of Zendaya, but I'm not like a diehard or anything like that, so she wasn't the factor that kind of got me in the door. It was mostly Luca's goodwill that got me seated. So when I did go see this, I was pretty blown away by it. The first thing that struck me immediately was the music. The soundtrack by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross had me like actively moving in my seat. It was that good. It has this kinetic energy to it that flows so well with the pacing of the film. It like makes you want to run through a brick wall. It's so good. Sometimes we play it at work, and you know, the response I've gotten is pretty good. Really at the heart of it is the story, and that's what's so enthralling for me. You know, you watch this story of these two guys who used to be best friends, and as things unfold, they become these bitter rivals. You watch the way that they both get caught up in Zendaya's web, and how, at the end of it, they don't succumb to her will, necessarily, and instead they allow their friendship to triumph, and they play the game that they both love on their own terms. I mean, that ending, and that ending shot specifically, are so satisfying. It was awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. So while this movie didn't move me on an emotional level the way that some of my number 1 movies in years past have, it does so much so well in all these other little areas that I really respect and admire that the overall sum of its parts is just a movie that I kind of had no choice but to give that #1 top spot. The movie also managed to kind of get me invested in tennis for the duration, so I feel like that kind of gets, you know, that's worth some recognition on its own right there. All right, guys, so that is it. That's my top 10 movies of 2024. I'm not closing the book on 2024 because, as I've stated, there are still a lot of movies from this year that I'm interested in seeing. So I'm going to spend, you know, most of January kind of knocking those out. And then, you know, as the year unfolds, we'll start to get some more good movies again. And, you know, we'll be rocking and rolling. The beginning, you know, the early stages of the year, not a lot going on. So I always like to spend that time catching up on things and watching the movies that I missed throughout the year. So guys, let me know what you think of my list. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Drop your own lists in the comments. I would love to see them. Are there any big movies that I missed that you really think I should keep an eye out for? Let me know all that stuff down in the comments. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't. We talk about new movies, old movies, physical media, and horror in general. So with all that being said, guys, I hope you had a good 2024. Let's look forward to some great movies in 2025. And please take care and watch more movies.